Have you ever found yourself being afraid of dying? Have you ever known somebody that is visibly, or at least mentally distressed about the thought of dying? Because this is a subject that we all are going to be confronted by, literally. One day. Maybe it's gonna take a while. Maybe it won't. Some people pass away young. Others pass away when they're fairly old. I mean, like in their 80s or 90s even, or beyond it. It happens. But ultimately, that is one certainty we have, is that one day we're gonna be gone. Now the question that I find absolutely fascinating that hardly anyone asks is, what happens after death? It is easy to quickly say, well, nothing happens. And we base that off of our subconscious realization that we have no clue what we were before we were born anyway, so when we die, there must be nothing at all. Now, I would rather want to dismiss that point of view in my own particular way, and maybe people will agree with this, maybe they won't, but it doesn't matter, I'm still going to say it anyway. I think the reason why you don't recall what you were before you were born is due to the fact that when you are born into this world, your mind is quickly programmed to focus upon this reality and on this reality alone. So you become trained through the school system from a very early age to focus on what is here and now, physically speaking, and to consider that the only reality. So basically your whole consciousness gets blocked in. It gets boxed in, I should say. But it also gets blocked from the bigger stream of consciousness that we could call universal consciousness or God itself. Now, where did I come to that conclusion? How could I make such a claim? Because I'm just like everybody else, living in a system that we call society, in a world where I also was trained to focus mostly upon this physical reality and nothing else, and to dismiss, well, pretty much everything else as either, well, it might be true or may not be true, maybe a hallucination or not. Let's not think about these strange metaphysical, spiritual, floaty subjects, right? That's how the average person looks at it in a way. But yet it is the most fascinating subject of all, to die. I mean, to leave this reality behind. And if you still exist after you leave this behind, well, we better learn about it, what it is. We better learn what does that entail? What exactly does that mean for our existence in general? Like, it means that you're not a human. It's something I realize as well, is that I'm not a human being. But yet you listen to my words and you would say, you clearly are a human being, or else you wouldn't have language and stuff like that. Physically speaking, my experience right now is that of being a human. However, it is just an experience, therefore it also ends. It's a temporary experience we're all going through, because at the core of it all, we're a stream of eternal consciousness. That's what you are as well. But it is hidden behind all the labels that the ego and the physical world has thrown on top of it, has programmed on top of that eternal awareness that you are. So it does take a bit of work to kind of go past all these labels and to finally figure out that you are an eternal consciousness. But if you are an eternal consciousness, then there should also be a way to prove this to your own satisfaction. And today I wanted to tell you how I have proven this to myself, and will keep proving it and keep getting better at it, specifically because this, what I'm about to share with you, isn't something that might work out instantly for you, and it might take some time for you, as it did for me before I reached the point that I was able to pull it off. But if we are eternal consciousness, there must be a way to prove it. That's what I figured as well for myself. There's no point in saying I am an eternal being and then have no experience on the matter, just like some fancy idea that might make me feel a little good about myself, about my existence, without any experience or awareness. But we want to have that experience. We want to become aware from actual personal experience that this is true. So what did I do? Well, I do exactly what you are doing every day, most likely, and pretty much everybody else on the planet, unless you're very advanced in meditation, which is to lay down to go to sleep. Yes, exactly, right? However, I did something totally different. In my case, I would lay down, close my eyes, I look straight into the darkness, but I use a certain subtle focus. Not too much, not too little, but I look straight into that darkness. And as I do so, with this subtle kind of focus, where I don't stress out too much, but it's also not too weak for you not to pay attention, so to speak. That's the idea behind it. As I did so, I actually found myself physically falling asleep. I could sense my senses turn off. They collapsed inwardly, so I no longer was aware of the outside world as we know it, but I became aware of a different world, what we call the inner world. Now, to me, this is one of the clearest, experiences that will reveal to me at least, and hopefully to you as well, that when you do physically die, this is part of the process. Your senses stop registering the physical world, and then you become aware of a different world, different realities, worlds within worlds. That's the beauty of eternal consciousness. And that is also very in alignment with the stories from people that had near-death experiences, that basically died physically speaking, but experienced all kinds of realities still. Is again because their senses, their whole consciousness turned away from the physical world itself as they know it, and then they became aware of a totally different reality that was always available to them, but out of view. It was just out of view, like you carry it around with you, but it's just not physically there, right? I think if we understand this process, and if we keep experimenting with this for ourselves, we will understand what it means to die. What is this fear of death? I think people are just simply afraid of letting go. And that's interesting, because everything physical that you have, objects specifically, eventually they're gonna break down, you're going to have to replace them, you're going to have to let them go. Some people might be so attached to physical objects that they might actually be sad, especially with children. You sometimes see that, right? They become a little sad when they have to let go of their favorite toy because it broke. As adults, we usually don't cry over our favorite toys, so to speak, the things that we enjoy using, physically speaking. We don't cry, we know we can replace them or let them get repaired, and it's okay. But eventually it's gonna break down, perhaps to a point that it won't be able to be repaired, and we'll simply replace it, or we're just like, okay, well, I grew out of this anyway, so I don't need it anymore, and it was fun to have while it lasted. Well, this, I would say, should be the attitude to have concerning your physical body as well. So when the time comes for you to die, most people actually, in reality, are able to make peace, but it happens so rapidly. If they're on their deathbed, from the stories I've heard, they suddenly find peace with this idea that they're going to pass away and they're going to let go of this physical life that they may have lived for many decades. They're going to leave their loved ones behind here, and they move on with their eternal journey. So if we can grasp this before the hour of death is upon us, we will already be able to enter this process both consciously and more peacefully to begin with. And the fear of death will vanish. Because I know I will pass away eventually, physically speaking at least. And it's the same for all of us. We can try and be immortal, physically speaking, but when I say that we are an immortal, eternal being, I talk about that consciousness itself that embodies the physical world. That consciousness is now tied to your physical body, but once the body stops functioning, consciousness is set free. It expands again into greater realities. You'll become aware of it. You'll be able to perceive them because you're no longer boxed into your physical body specifically in order to function in what we call time and space reality. That's why we have the body, in order to function currently in this world. But this world is not the only thing there is to existence. And this we have to understand. This we have to contemplate deeply for ourselves and become aware of this as the truth. So we don't no longer accept it as a fun and fancy and amazing idea about ourselves. We become aware of it through what I suggested we should experiment with, because it worked for me and it might work for you, which is to lay down when you go to sleep at night. Instead of going to bed with the intent of falling asleep, go to bed with the intent of proving to yourself that you are consciousness and not just a physical body. Because if this is true, then you should be able to experience it somehow, some way. This is what you have to remember. You should be able to prove this to your own satisfaction, that you are an eternal consciousness that can actually detach itself from this physical body, and that will then show you that yes, I'm actually not just a physical body at all. So when I die, it clearly means it's not the end of anything. And even though I can't remember what I was before I was physically born, and that can logically be explained, in my opinion again, by the fact that you are so trained to focus on your physical embodiment right now in existence that you completely forgot what it was all about before you were physically here. This is why that some people say through years of meditation and deep self-reflection that they might actually make the claim that they remember what they were before they were born. Now we can, like this message, take that to heart or dismiss it as nonsense. That's how it goes. I know that's the case in my messages as well. People might dismiss this entirely and think this guy's talking a bunch of nonsense, or he's completely nuts. His mind is not functioning right. Well, that's fine, because I cannot deny the experiences I've had so far that have proven to me, to my own satisfaction, parts of the eternal nature of consciousness. And I haven't seen it all. I haven't experienced all of what is out there, obviously, because it is like beyond the scope of human imagination. Like it is as an eternal journey. It's gonna keep going on. And that's the beautiful part about it. Once we learn to accept and embrace that and work with it to our own advantage, we can most definitely overcome the fear of death and become much stronger and wiser individuals in this process. So I hope you will consider this message that I got for you today, because if you close your eyes and learn to consciously fall asleep, it takes practice. It takes a subtle kind of concentration where not too much because you'll stay wide awake, but also not too little because you'll go unconscious like we do normally speaking. When we fall asleep, we go unconscious. And then we start dreaming and we don't even realize that we are dreaming anymore. But if you're able to find that subtle focus, you will discover some strange things happening to you. At first they might actually be scary, but when they happened to me, I knew there's nothing to be scared about. This is all totally normal for eternal consciousness, so I'm going right in here. Because what I'm talking about is the sensation of your senses turning off. Might be a little disturbing at first. I'm not gonna lie, it does feel a little strange at first when you realize that your eyes are no longer functioning and your ears are no longer hearing the physical world. But you do start to notice at the same time you start hearing and seeing different realities. And that can really make you think about the nature of who and what we are. And it also gives new meaning to the idea of death, because it clearly cannot exist. If consciousness can detach itself from the body, well, that is obviously what happens when the body passes away. So what great adventures are still in store for us? That is the beauty of life.